Star Trek Ascendancy Rulebook, published by Gale Force 9. Game designed by Sean Swigart, Aaron Dill. Read by Ronald Villaver of Variable Play. Game components. System disks. The game map is made up of round system disks connected to other systems via space lanes of different lengths. Each planetary system has a different capacity to hold resource nodes, shown as colored tabs next to the planet. The space lane die is used to determine the lane's strength. Space lanes. Space lane die. Warp tokens. Warp tokens indicate how far your starship can travel at warp and indicate where your starships entered warp. Command consoles. Command console cards include each civilization's rules, track weapon and shield levels, and have a place to put each player's supply of tokens. Plastic sliders. Ascendancy tokens. Ascendancy tokens track how dominant each civilization is. The first player to achieve 5 ascendancy wins the game. Turn order cards. Each game round, players compete for the initiative. Turn order cards indicate sequence of play. Advancement cards. Advancement cards detail a variety of cultural and technological achievements which can be completed. Each civilization has a unique advancement deck. Fleet cards and markers. Fleet cards hold groups of 3 or more ships. Ships are placed on the fleet card, and then the fleet markers show the fleet's position on the board. Starships and control nodes. Federation, Klingon, Romulan. Each civilization has their own starships which explore the galaxy, attack rivals, and defend their systems. Control nodes are placed on a system's planet to mark which civilization controls the system. Starbases allow you to build ships and commission fleets. Starbases also fight in space battles and make it more difficult for a rival to attempt hegemony. Each starbase you control also increases your commands by 1. Resource nodes. Culture, production, research. Resource tokens. Command tokens. Command tokens indicate how many orders you may issue on your turn. Exploration cards. As you explore the galaxy, you'll encounter a wide variety of discoveries, crises, and strange new civilizations. When you discover a new planetary system, draw an exploration card to see what you've found. Trade agreement cards. Each civilization has 3 trade agreements they may give to other players to represent peaceful commerce between their civilizations. Each trade agreement you receive from another player increases your production each turn. Player turn cards. Player turns are divided into building and command phases. The 2-sided player turn cards list all the building costs on one side and all the command options on the other. Game setup. Setting up a game of Star Trek Ascendancy is straightforward. Each player starts with their home system, a few ships, and some resources. At the beginning of the game, no civilization has made first contact, and the whole galaxy is yet to be discovered. On page 3, you can see an example of what a game looks like when it is set up and ready to play. Command console and components. Each player takes a command console for their civilization they're playing. Command consoles track weapon and shield levels. Your weapons start at the hit roll of 5+. Your shield modifier starts at 0. The bottom of the command console has spaces for your resource token reserves. Each command console also contains any special rules that apply to that civilization. Give each player all the components associated with their civilization. Each player should have 30 ships, 3 fleet markers, 3 fleet cards, 3 starbase tokens, 15 advancement cards, 10 command nodes, and their civilization's player turn reference. Starting resources. Each player starts with 3 production, 3 research, and 3 culture tokens. Star Trek Ascendancy. Each player starts with 1 Ascendancy token. Ascendancy tokens should be placed so that all players can see how many each player currently has. Command tokens. Each player starts with 5 command tokens. Command tokens should be placed face up where all the players can see them. Command tokens are double-sided. The exhausted side indicates that the command has been used this turn. Starbases you control increase your commands by 1. Completing an advancement, which pictures a command token, also increases your commands by 1. Anytime you gain a command, it starts play exhausted and will be refreshed at the end of the game round. Advancement decks. Each civilization begins with 1 completed advancement, marked Starting Advancement on the card. Place the starting advancement apart from your advancement deck, then shuffle your advancement deck. Over the course of the game, players will complete additional advancements. Before an advancement is complete, it is considered a project. You may have a number of ongoing projects equal to the number of research nodes you control. Each completed advancement adds special rules to your civilization and may increase the speed of your starships. For full details on speed and movement, see page 11. Home system. Each player's home system starts fully developed with 1 of each resource node and 1 of their control nodes. Starting ships. Each player starts with 3 ships on their home system. Suggested player layout. Project area. Projects are placed next to your deck. Research tokens are placed on the command console. Command tokens above. Fleet area displays which fleets are commissioned and how many ships are in each fleet. Advancement area. When you complete projects, move them into your advancement area with your starting advancement. Each player has their own supply of 30 ships, 10 control nodes, and 3 starbase tokens. Depending on the size and shape of your game table, you may need to lay out your player area differently. Make sure your advancement area and project area are distinct from each other. System disks separate the interstellar phenomenon system disks from the planetary system disks. Next, set aside a stack of random planetary system disks equal to twice the number of players, i.e., 6 planetary systems for a 3-player game. These are your starting planetary systems. Shuffle the remaining planetary systems with all the phenomenons. Then, place the starting planetary system on top, creating a stack of all the system disks with each player's planetary system on top. 1. Separate out all phenomenon from the system disks. 2. Make a stack of starting planetary systems, 2 per player. 3. Shuffle the phenomenons into the remaining planetary systems. 4. Put 6 separate planetary systems on top of the big stack of disks. Shuffled in planetary and phenomenon systems. Re-rolling dice. Some special rules will allow you to re-roll dice. You may only re-roll any given die once per special rule. If you have different abilities which allow you to re-roll dice, they could be combined to allow you to re-roll a die more than once, but each rule can only be used once. A Romulan battle fleet of 5 ships, which allows you to re-roll once in a space battle, is in combat with a rival. The Romulan has also completed their superior targeting array, which allows them to re-roll a die in combat. In the Romulan attack, they roll 1, 1, 4, 5, 6. Using the battle fleet's special rule, they re-roll both ones and get 1 in 6. Even though they rolled another 1, they can't use the battle fleet's rule again to re-roll the same die. The Romulans can use their superior targeting array to re-roll that die a second time. Suggested game layout. Home systems about 5 inches from the edge. 18 inches. Home systems spaced equally apart. 18 inches, 18 inches. Home systems about 5 inches from the edge. Depending on what type of table you're playing on, distances between the home systems and the table edges may vary. This important thing is for home systems to be about the same distance from each other and the table edge. Game area. Star Trek Ascendancy uses an organic, growing map that can be played on any shape of table. Before the game begins, agree on what part of the game table is usable. Can you build right out to the edge? Up to the certain distance of the edge? Each player starts with their home system, separate from the other civilizations. As you play, you'll discover strange new worlds, explore interstellar phenomena, and uncover unknown civilizations. The game board is made out of round system disks connecting to other systems via space lanes of different lengths. When moving through the map, each system disk counts as one sector. Space lanes contain between 2 to 4 sectors. A 3 feet by 3 feet area works well, with home systems placed such that each home system is an equal distance from 2 other players, and about 5 inches from the edge of the play area. If you place your home systems closer together, you'll come into contact much faster, allowing earlier trading but creating more competitions for new systems. Placed farther apart, players will have more time to discover new worlds and develop their civilizations before connecting with other player systems. Winning the game. There are 2 different paths for winning the game. You can win the game by becoming the most ascendant civilization in the galaxy, or by militarily dominating your rivals. Ascendancy Victory. At the end of a game round, a player who both controls their home system and has 5 Ascendancy tokens wins the game. They have established their cultural dominance over the galaxy. Ascendancy tokens may be purchased anytime on your turn, with 5 culture tokens. Supremacy Victory. At the end of a game round, if a single player controls 3 home systems, one of which must be their own, that player has dominated the galaxy and wins the game. Tied Victories. At the end of a game round, if 2 players have achieved victory through Ascendancy or Supremacy, the player who controls the most systems win. If it's still a tie, both civilizations have risen to greatness and the players share their victory. Starfleet Ethics. Star Trek Ascendancy is a competitive game, with every player trying to dominate, destroy, and absorb their rivals. Don't pull out your bat'leth when somebody invades your home world. It's all in the spirit of the game. Similarly, if your civilization is running roughshod over the galaxy, try to maintain a Picard level aplomb as you become the ascendant power in the galaxy. A note on game length. Star Trek Ascendancy is a big, galaxy-spanning game that follows the arc of civilizations. Be prepared, this is a long game. With experienced players, the game will take about an hour per player. Your first few games will be longer. Page 26 of this rulebook includes options for playing the game in less time. Key game terms. The following is a reference of the important game terms which are used throughout the rulebook. Adjacent. Sectors right next to each other are adjacent. Space combat, usually but not always, takes place between adjacent sectors. Capacity. The potential of a system to hold resource nodes. Systems can hold between 1 and 3 nodes. Contest. You contest a sector when you and another player have ships in the sector. A sector containing more than 2 players' ships is contested. Control. Control nodes mark which player controls a system. You may gain control of a system through colonization, invasion, or hegemony. You control a starbase. When you control the system the starbase is in. Developed. A planetary system is developed when it contains 1 or more nodes. A system with no nodes is considered undeveloped. Starbases are not nodes. Exhausted. Cards or tokens that are face down. Exhausted cards and tokens cannot be used until they are refreshed, flipped face up. First contact. A civilization is considered to have made the first contact once their home system is connected to another player's home system via space lanes and systems. Fleet. A group of ships that move and fights together. Any rules that apply to ships also apply to fleets. Game round. Star Trek Ascendancy is played in a series of rounds. Each round consists of 3 stages: Initiative, Execution, and Recharge. Home System, the system with which a player begins the game. You may build ships and commission fleets in your own home system, whether or not there is a starbase there. This is not true on a rival's home system if you take control of it. Hostile. Rivals and their ships are considered hostile when you don't hold one of their trade agreements. In orbit. Any ship present in a planetary system is in orbit, whether or not the system contains other players' ships. Node. A structure built on a planet's surface. This includes resource nodes and control nodes. Starbases are not nodes. Occupy. You occupy a sector when you are the only player with ships in that sector. Peace. You are at peace with any rival whose trade agreements you hold, and their ships are considered peaceful. Project. An advancement card that is not yet completed. During each player's building phase, they may add a research token to each of their projects. Each civilization has a unique deck of advancement cards containing a variety of technological and civil achievements. Refresh. Flip an exhausted, face down game piece, face up. Reroll. Some rules allow you to roll a die again. You may not use a rule to reroll the same die multiple times. If you have multiple rules that allow you to reroll dice, you may use different rules to reroll the same die multiple times, but once per rule. Reserves. The resources you hold on your command console but have not yet spent. Resources. Production, research, and culture are resources. Ships, nodes, and ascendancy tokens are not resources. Sector. Any spot on the board in which a ship can be placed. A system disk counts as a single sector. Space lanes are divided into 2, 3, or 4 separate sectors. Structure. Each physical item built in a system is considered a structure. Resource nodes, control nodes, and starbases are all structures. Supply. The shared resource nodes and tokens in the box that have not been built or earned by the players. The supply is considered to be unlimited. Trade agreements. In Star Trek Ascendancy, you can't directly give your resources to another player. What you can do is establish trade agreements between your civilizations, peacefully allowing commerce between otherwise hostile factions. Each player starts with 3 of their own trade agreements. Trade agreements only produce resources when they are given to another player. Establishing trade agreements. To give or receive a trade agreement, you must have a ship on a control node adjacent to or in the same sector as one of the rival's ships or control nodes. You may do this at any time. Once you have given a rival a trade agreement, you may exchange it for one of your other trade agreement cards, regardless of the ship's positions. You may only hold one trade agreement at a time from each rival. You are considered to be at peace with any player whose trade agreements you currently hold. This allows you to ask permission to move through and into sectors containing their ships. See page 11 for details. Any rival whose trade agreements you do not hold are considered hostile. Trade profits. During the recharge stage, players take resource pictured on the trade agreements they have received. Tip. Trade agreements are a powerful source of resources. The first player to make contact and begin trading will find themselves in an advantageous position. Withdrawing trade agreements. Easily made, easily broken. You can revoke any of your trade agreements at any time, for any reason. However, to give back a rival's trade agreement you hold, you'll have to betray them. Betrayal. If you attack a player whose trade agreement you hold, you have broken the peace, and you must return their trade agreement. Once the combat has begun, participants can't exchange trade agreements until the combat is over. A game round. Each game round consists of 3 stages: Initiative, Execution, and Recharge. Initiative stage. Page 7. Players spend resources to influence galactic politics and seize the initiative this game round. The player who spends the most resources gets their pick of the turn order cards for the coming round. Players may only spend resources if they have made first contact. Execution Stage, page 8. Players take their turns in the order decided by the initiative stage, building up their civilizations, researching new projects, upgrading their weapons and shields, and issuing commands to their starships. On their turn, players may also spend 5 culture to ascend. Recharge Stage, page 24. At the end of each game round, there is a recharge stage. Each recharge stage consists of victory check, generate resources, refresh cards and tokens, add warp tokens to ships at warp, resupply phenomenon with research tokens. After the recharge stage, another game round begins. Initiative Stage. At the beginning of each game round, each player who has made first contact has to decide how many resources they are going to commit to seizing the initiative in galactic politics. Players will then choose their turn order in the order of how many resources they have devoted. The player who spends the most gets their pick of turn order cards. Players who have not made first contact with another civilization have no ability to influence other civilizations and do not participate. Note: for the first turn or two, when no one has made first contact, no one is eligible to influence galactic politics, so all turn orders will be passed out randomly. Starting with the player who went first the previous game round, players who have made first contact may place a number of resources on the turn order card they used in the previous turn. You may use any resource, production, research, or culture. Players commit resources in the order of the turn order cards they hold from the previous turn. When it's your turn, you may always choose to commit nothing. If you decide to commit resources, you may not spend the same total number of resources as any other player who has already gone. Note: StarTrek Ascendancy comes with turn order cards marked 1 through 10. When playing a 3-player game, use cards 1, 2, and 3. The additional turn order cards can be used with the optional rules on page 26 or in games with more than 3 players. Choosing turn order cards. The player who spent the most gets to choose their turn order card first. Players may choose whichever card they like, i.e., the player who chooses first doesn't have to choose the turn order 1 card. The remaining players who spent resources choose their turn order cards in descending order of how many resources they've spent. All resources committed are discarded and returned to the supply. Players who have made first contact or have spent nothing choose their turn order card randomly from the remaining cards. The turn order cards remains face up throughout the initiative stage. Example: John, Pete, and Sally are all connected and eligible to participate. Pete went first the previous turn, so he decides first and commits 2 production. John went second the previous round, so he goes second and commits 1 research token. Sally went third the previous round, so she decides last and commits 3 resources. Total 2 production and 1 research. Since Sally spent the most, she gets first pick of the turn order cards. Pete chooses second, and John gets a turn order card that's left over. Execution Stage. Starting with the player holding the turn order 1 card, players take their turns. Each player's turn consists of a building phase, followed by a command phase. Building phase. At the start of each player's turn is a building phase, in which they spend resources to develop their civilization, research advancements, and upgrade their weapons and shields. These may be done in any order. Build ships. Ships cost 1 production each. You may build a ship at any starbase you control and your home system, assuming you still control your homeworld. If you're building 3 or more ships in the same system, you may immediately group them into a fleet without spending a command. For full details on fleets, see page 22. Note: each player has a limited number of ships and control nodes they can have on the table at a time. Future expansions may add ships and control nodes. Make sure all players have the same amounts. Colonize a system. You may colonize an undeveloped planetary system you occupy by building a control node. A sector is undeveloped when it doesn't contain any nodes. Establishing a new colony is a resource-intensive process. Starships are often used as a functional core of the new colony. Colonizing a new sector costs 1 culture, plus a starship in orbit of the system being colonized. To show that you've established a colony in the system, place one of your control nodes on the planet. Build a resource node. Some planets are rich in natural resources. Others contain sites rich in scientific research potential, while others have the potential to support great cities and cultural touchstones. Each system has a capacity marked with colored tabs around the edge of the planet that shows how many of each type of node may be built. You may only build nodes in systems you control. To build a resource node, spend the cost listed for that type of node. Sometimes the systems will have an open capacity, which means that it's a versatile enough system that you can choose what type of node to be built there. Later, resource nodes built on open sites can be replaced by paying the full cost of the new node. Once built, you may not simply destroy your nodes. Commit research. In your building phase, you may also commit research to your advancement projects. The amount of research required to finish the project is listed in the upper left of each card. You may add one research token each advancement project turn. Claiming research from phenomena can speed the project's completion. For full details on claiming research from a phenomenon, see page 14. In your building phase, you may add one research token to each of your projects per turn. Once a project has enough research to complete it, you may use its rule immediately. Once you commit research tokens to a project, you can't move them around or take them back. In the first game round, players won't have any projects yet. In your command phase, you may use commands to launch new projects. For full details on launching new projects, see page 23. The number of research nodes you control is the maximum number of projects you may have in your project area. If at any point in the game, you have more projects than you control research nodes, you must discard projects until that's no longer the case. Discarding projects. Whenever a project is discarded, it goes to the bottom of its advancement deck, and any research tokens on the project are returned to the supply. Finishing projects. When you commit enough research tokens to finish a project, it becomes a usable advancement. Move it to your advancement area. If applicable, you may use the completed advancement special rules immediately. Unless a card states otherwise, you may only use an advancement rules on your turn. Each advancement has a type listed on the right-hand edge of the card. Some advancement rules only affect a certain type of advancement. For example, the Romulans have an advancement that shows them to exhaust an espionage card. When you finish a project, it's a good idea to let your rivals know what your new advancement does. Advancements may sometimes be exhausted. Exhausted advancements may not be used in any way and will be refreshed during the recharge stage at the end of the game round. Warp tokens. Warp token advancements. Some advancements picture warp tokens on the lower right-hand corner of the card. When completed, these advancements increase the warp speed of your ships, in addition to their special rules. For details on warp movement, see page 11. Command advancements. Some advancements picture a command token. When you complete an advancement which pictures a command token, the number of commands you have immediately increases by 1. This new command starts exhausted and will be refreshed the following recharge stage. There are some Romulan advancements which picture a culture token. When a Romulan player completes these, the Romulans take a culture token. Upgrading weapons and shields. In addition to committing research tokens to projects, you may also spend research to improve your weapons and shields. The cost to upgrade your weapons and shields is listed on your command console, directly across from your current weapons shield levels. Unlike advancement projects, upgrading your weapons and shields is a single one-time cost, not something you commit research to over time. The cost to upgrade your weapons or shield is shown directly across your current weapons and shields level. Here, the Federation has a hit roll of 5+, and it would cost 4 research to upgrade it to a hit roll of 4+. Building special rules. Some advancement special rules will allow you to do something extra during your building phase. These may be used at any time while you're building. End of building. After you complete your building phase, your command phase begins. Once you start your command phase, you may not spend resources to build unless a specific rule allows you to do so. Ascending is the only exception. You may spend 5 culture tokens to take an Ascendancy token at any time during your turn. Command phase. On your turn after your build phase, there are a number of things that you can issue a command to do. Move ships and fleets. Initiate space battle. Invade the planet. Attempt cultural hegemony. Commission a fleet for Starbase. Launch new advancement projects. Activate special rules. When you issue a command, exhaust a command token to show it has been used. When you're done issuing commands, your turn is over, and the player with the next turn order card takes their turn. All commands may be issued multiple times per turn as long as you have commands remaining. Movement. Ships can move at impulse or warp speed. Each movement command moves one ship or fleet. You may issue more than one movement command to the same ship on a single turn. For example, you can choose the command to have a ship exit warp, and then use a second command to have the ship move at impulse speed. As you move your ships into unexplored space, you'll place new space lanes and system disks on the board, building the galactic map as you play. Discovering and placing new systems always ends your movement. Impulse movement. All ships have a base impulse speed of 2. To move a ship at impulse, exhaust the command and move a ship up to 2 sectors. You may place a new space lane and systems at impulse. Discovering a new system always ends your move. Entering warp. To enter warp, exhaust the command token and move a ship or fleet just off the system or space lane they are in, and place a warp token next to the ship, pointing to the sector from which they entered warp. Ships will accumulate additional warp tokens at the end of each game round, or by spending additional commands. Ships at warp don't count as being in the sector from which they left. For all intents and purposes, ships at warp are not on the board until they exit warp. Exiting warp. To have a ship at warp exit warp, exhaust the command. When a ship exits warp, it may move through a number of systems equal to the number of warp tokens they have accumulated, plus the number of warp tokens pictured on their completed advancements. If the ship enters warp from a system, they don't count the system in which they started. With 4 warp tokens, the Klingon ship may move up to 4 systems. You may choose to move through fewer systems or exit warp early in a space lane. When you come out of warp in a space lane, you may stop at any sector of the space lane. After exiting warp, discard the ship's warp tokens. You may choose to enter a new system as part of your warp movement. Entering a new system always ends your movement, even if you have movement remaining. Traveling at warp. You may also use a command to give another warp token to a ship or fleet who has already entered warp. Ships at warp receive additional warp tokens during the recharge stage. Entering rival territory. As you move through space at impulse or warp, you may not enter or pass through a sector you don't control that contains hostile rival ships. You may ask for permission to enter or move through a sector which contains rival ships with whom you are at peace. They may agree or not as they wish. If they don't agree, you must end your movement. You may always move through systems you control, regardless of any rival presence. Note, if a rival denies you access to their system, you can't reverse your course and take back the movement you used to get there. If you were traveling at warp speed, you must end your movement in the sector previous to theirs. Hazardous Systems. Some systems are marked with red alert warning. When your ships end their movement in a hazardous system, you must brave the hazard and see if they survive. Shields protect against hazards. To brave a hazard, add the ship's shield modifier to the system's hazard level. The player to your right then rolls a die for each ship that entered their movement in the hazardous sector. For each die roll that is equal to or higher than the shield's modified hazard level, one ship is destroyed. For example, a Federation ship ends its movement in the Stellar Nursery, which is a level 4 hazard. The Federation has upgraded their shields once, so has a shield modifier of 1. The Klingon player to the right rolls a die. A roll of a 5 or 6 will destroy the Federation ship. Space is big. If you don't stop in a hazardous sector, you don't have to make a hazard roll. You were able to navigate around the dangerous system. If you build ships in a hazardous sector, you don't need to make a hazard roll when you deploy them or when they leave. Ships only have to brave a hazard when they end the movement there. Building the galaxy. As you move through the galaxy, you'll chart new space lanes and systems and build a galactic map unique to your game. Every new map presents new challenges and opportunities. Placing new space lanes. Each system disk has a maximum number of space lanes that can connect to it, listed on the bottom of the system disk. Once this many space lanes are connected, you may not make any new connections to that system. As you're moving, you may choose to place and travel in new space lanes if the system you're leaving has a new space lane connections. Roll the space lane die to determine the length of the new space lane. You may place a new space lane on the map when moving at impulse speed or exiting warp. Place the new space lane connected to the system you're leaving and move the ship into the new space lane. The new space lane may be placed anywhere on the outside edge of the system, as long as there is room for it. Abandon space lanes. If a space lane contains no ships and is only connected to one system, remove the space lane. For example, this can happen when a ship enters a space lane but leaves before a system is placed on the other end, or if a ship in a disconnected space lane is destroyed. Ships at warp do not count as being on the board. If all the ships in an open-ended space lane are at warp, remove the space lane and point the ship's warp tokens at the connected system. Placing new system disks. When moving at impulse or exiting warp, you may move beyond the unconnected end of the space lane and place a new system disk. To place a new system on the table, draw a new system disk and place it face up on the table, connected to the space lane that contains your ship. Move your ship into the new system. Moving into a newly placed system always ends your movement. New placed systems may not touch or overlap any existing space lanes or system disks. If the new system is hazardous, you'll have to brave the hazard first. For details on hazardous systems, see page 12. Placing new system disk at warp. When a ship exits warp, it can travel through a number of systems. As part of its movement, the ship can place new space lanes and systems. Moving into a newly placed system always ends a ship's movement. Fixed versus floating systems. As you head into unexplored space, uncertainty abounds. The best course to reach one-star system isn't determined immediately upon discovering it. In Star Trek Ascendancy, system disks are usually not fixed in place on the board when they are first placed. A system disk is fixed when it is connected to two other systems. Fixed system disks cannot be moved. When a system disk is only connected to one other system, it's floating. On your turn, you may swing any floating system as long as it remains connected to the system to which it's connected. You may want to swing a floating system to make room for a new system or to make a connection between systems. When swinging a floating system, you may not pick it off the board. You can only swing it around the single system to which it's connected. As soon as the system is connected to two other systems, it is fixed in place and can no longer be moved. Destroyed systems. Through cataclysms or conflict, a whole system may be destroyed. If there are any empty space lanes connected to the destroyed systems, remove those as well. Making connections. When you're leaving a floating system, you can also move another floating system to try to make a connection between the two with a new space lane. When you leave the floating system, roll the space lane die to see what length of space lane you're placing. If that space lane is long enough to bridge the gap between the two floating systems, you can connect the two systems with the new space lane and continue your movement. If the new space lane isn't long enough to make the new connection you want and the ship is moving at warp, you can either stop in the new space lane or continue on to discover a new system at the end of the new space lane. If the ship is attempting to make a connection at impulse and isn't able to, it can reverse course and use its second sector movement to go back to the system where it started, abandoning the lane. Additional map rules. There are a few additional rules to keep in mind as you're playing and building your galaxy. Space lanes cannot cross each other. System disks cannot touch each other. Home systems are always considered fixed in place. You may use a space lane to test if a connection is possible before committing to movement. A system is only considered floating if it's connected to a fixed system. Discovering phenomena. Not all systems contain habitable planets. There's a wide variety of interstellar phenomena that deserve further study. Science is dangerous. Phenomena are hazardous to study and explore. When the system disk you discover is a phenomenon, place one research token from the supply on the phenomenon. As with discovering any hazardous systems, all ships in the system must brave the hazard. If at least one ship survives, take the research token from the phenomenon. You may place this research on one of your projects or in your reserves. If all the ships are destroyed, the research token remains on the phenomenon. Do not draw an exploration card when you discover a phenomenon. Further study. During the recharge stage, a research token will be placed on each phenomenon that doesn't already have one. The first player each round to successfully brave the phenomenon's hazard takes the research token. The research token may be placed on a project or added to your reserves. Note: if one of your ships starts your turn in a phenomenon, you may spend a command to brave the hazard without actually moving. Discovering planetary systems. Most systems are planetary systems, containing potentially habitable worlds. Planetary systems feature the most prominent planets along with the type of nodes that can be built in that system. If the system you discover is a hazardous planetary system, all the ships must brave the hazard. If your ships do not survive entry into the hazardous planet system, place an exploration card face down on the system. The first player to brave the hazard must resolve the card. If any of your ships do survive entry into the hazardous planetary system, or the discovered system is not hazardous, draw an exploration card and resolve its effects. Do not draw an exploration card when you discover a phenomenon. Exploration cards. There are 4 types of exploration cards. Most exploration cards are resolved immediately. Some remain in play. Set them face up on the system until they are resolved. Once the system is colonized, discard the card. Crisis. Crisis card represents some sort of problem or difficulty. Some crisis cards will force the ships to brave a hazard. Discovery. In addition to crises, new worlds hold the promise of never-before-seen wonders, technological revelations, and contact with new species. Virgin Worlds. A number of cards in the exploration deck are virgin worlds, planets which are perfectly suitable for habitation but devoid of sentient life that needs to be accommodated or conquered. Civilization. Some systems you'll discover are already inhabited. These independent civilizations range from primitive, pre-warp societies up to full warp capable advanced cultures. When you draw a civilization exploration card, the card will direct you to either place production tokens on the system, making it a pre-warp civilization, or warp tokens, making it a warp capable civilization. A pre-warp civilization. Pre-warp civilizations. Pre-warp civilizations have not yet achieved faster than light space travel. These worlds have not developed any technology or infrastructure that's usable by more advanced cultures. Pre-warp civilization cards will direct you to place a number of resource tokens on the system, representing the system's raw materials and a population ripe for exploitation. The first player to colonize the system takes the resource tokens from the system. Warp-capable civilizations. Each warp-capable civilization card directs you to place a number of warp tokens on the system equal to the level of the civilization, making it as a warp-capable civilization. Each warp-capable civilization card will also direct you to develop a number of nodes in the system. When developing a resource node of a warp-capable civilization, develop any production capacity first, then research capacity, and finally any culture capacity, up to the number of nodes the card instructs you to develop. Independent civilization examples. The following are a couple of examples of discovering warp-capable independent civilizations. The Romulans discovered a level 2 warp-capable civilization on Terra Nova, which has a capacity of 1 production, 1 research, and 1 culture. The civilization card directs you to develop 2 nodes. The production capacity is developed first, 1 production node. Next, the research capacity is developed, 1 research node. The Federation player discovers a level 3 warp-capable civilization on Ardana. Ardana has 1 production, 1 research, and 1 open capacity. It's possible to develop 2 production nodes since Ardana has both production and an open site. The production capacity is developed first, then a research node is placed on the 3rd node. Taking control of warp-capable civilizations. Warp-capable civilizations have discovered sufficient technology and built their planet's infrastructure such that colonization is no longer an option. Taking control of a system that's inhabited by a warp-capable civilization is more difficult than simply colonizing a system with a pre-warp culture. Whenever there are developed structures on a planet, hegemony or invasion are your only options of taking control. Space battles. You can exhaust the command to initiate a space battle with rival ships in a single adjacent sector, or in a single sector which you both have ships. Each space battle consists of a number of rounds of combat in which both players roll to score hits, take casualties, then decide whether to retreat or keep fighting. The player who initiates the battle is the attacker. Battles in the same sector. Normally, space battles take place between adjacent sectors, but can take place between rivals in the same sector. For example, this can happen if two civilizations had a trade agreement which was broken, a cloaking device was used, or a player built ships in a system occupied by a rival. Scoring hits. Your current weapons level determines your hit roll. To score a hit, you need to roll equal to or higher than your hit roll. Your opponent's shield modifier is added to your hit roll, making it more difficult to hit. Both players roll a number of dice equal to the number of ships they have involved in the combat. All dice have a chance to score a hit and destroy a rival ship. Above, a fleet of 5 Klingon ships have attacked the Romulans, as they do. The Klingons have upgraded their weapons twice, so they need to roll a 3 or better to hit. The Romulans have upgraded their shields once, giving them a shield modifier of 1. So the Klingons have to hit a roll 4+. The Klingons roll 5 dice. Any rolls of 4, 5, or 6 score a hit. The Romulans haven't upgraded their weapons, nor have the Klingons upgraded their shields, so the Romulans need a 5 or better to score a hit. Since the Klingon's shield modifier is 0, and the Romulans' hit roll is 5+. Taking casualties. Every hit destroys a rival ship. Both players roll a hit and then take casualties simultaneously. If there's a choice of where casualties are going to be taken, the player who have inflicted the hit chooses how to allocate the hits. For example, if you score 5 hits against a rival who has 5 ships in the fleet and 2 individual ships, you may allocate all the hits to the fleet. Starbase support in space battles. Starbases provide support for your ships in space battles. When you have ships in orbit of a system you control with a starbase, roll an additional die to hit. Starbases cannot fight on their own. Attacking from multiple sectors. If you have ships in one or more adjacent sector, you may use a command to have all the ships in adjacent sectors to join in the attack. Retreating from combat. After taking casualties, each player assesses the state of their ships, starting with the attacker. Players decide whether or not to retreat. Retreats are made at impulse speed. Retreats must be made through existing space lanes. You will not place a new space lane with a retreat move. When you retreat, all your ships must move and end their retreat in the same sector. Blocked retreats. Ships unable to move because rival ships are blocking the sectors may not retreat. Combat continues. If none of the players involved choose to retreat or unable to retreat, another round of combat begins. Without exhausting any additional commands, continue to fight additional rounds of combat until either the attacker or the defender retreats or a player has no more ships remaining. First strike. Some advancements give ships or nodes first strike. In the first round of combat, when your ships have first strike, your opponent must take casualties before rolling to hit with their ships. First strike is only used in the initial round of combat. First strike does not grant an extra attack before combat begins. It forces your opponent to take casualties before firing back. In the first round of combat, if both sides have first strike, neither may use it. For example, 6 Romulan ships with first strike attack 4 Federation ships. The Romulans score 2 hits, destroying 2 Federation ships. The remaining 2 Federation ships score a hit. In the second round of combat, the remaining 5 Romulan ships and 2 Federation ships will roll to hit and take casualties simultaneously as normal. Winning a space battle. The player who destroys all the rival ships or forces them into retreat wins the space battle. The winning player may make a tactical maneuver with some or all of their ships after the space battle is over. Tactical maneuvers are a move made at impulse speed and do not exhaust the command. All the winner's ships which move must use existing space lanes and end up in the same sector. Battles with more than 2 players. There will only ever be one attacker, but it's possible for there to be more than one defender. In space battles with more than 2 defenders, the attacker must decide how they are dividing their dice between the defenders before rolling to hit. All the defenders' hits are directed to the attacker. The defenders choose separately whether or not to retreat after each round of combat. The battle is over when all the defenders are eliminated or routed, or the attacker is eliminated or routed. Planetary Invasion. When your ships occupy a developed system you do not control, you may use a command to invade the planet. If there are any rival ships in the system, you must attack the ships in the space battle first before invading the system. If the invasion is successful, you will take control of the system. Each planetary invasion consists of a number of rounds of combat in which both players roll to score hits, take casualties, then decide whether to surrender, retreat, or keep fighting. Note: invasions are a one-way affair. You may not use a command to have your nodes initiate an attack against ships occupying their systems. Scoring hits. The attacker rolls a number of dice equal to the number of ships they have in the system. The defender rolls a number of dice equal to the number of nodes they have built on the planet, including the control node. Every die rolled has a chance to score a hit. Starbases do not fight in a planetary invasion, only space battles. As in space battles, both players' current weapon levels determine their hit roll. To score a hit, you need to roll equal or higher than your hit roll. Each player adds their opponent's shield modifier to hit their hit roll, making it more difficult to hit. Taking casualties. Every hit scored by the defender's nodes destroys one of the attacker's ship. In a planetary invasion, the goal of the attacker is to take control of the planet, ideally with minimal damage done to the planet's infrastructure. Hits by the attacker don't necessarily destroy nodes. The number of hits scored by the attacker determines the results of the planetary invasion. Invasion results. Depending on how many hits the attacker scores, there are a few possible results. Successful invasion. If the attacker scores more hits than the defender has nodes, the attacker has invaded with overwhelming force and has taken control of the system and won the combat. Place the attacker's control node on the system, replacing the existing control node if the planet was controlled by a rival. The attacker must still take any casualties caused by the defender. For example, in the illustration to the left, the Klingons would need to hit with all 4 of their attacks to seize control of the Federation system without destroying any of the nodes on the planet. Collateral damage. If the attacker scores fewer hits than the defender has nodes, the attacker must choose any number of resource nodes to destroy equal to the number of hits scored. The control node is not destroyed. Another round of combat is then fought unless the attacker chooses to retreat or the defender chooses to surrender. For example, if the Klingons to the left only scored with a single hit, they could choose to destroy either the culture node or the research node. If they scored 2 hits, they would have to destroy both research nodes, leaving only the Federation control node. Total annihilation. If the attacker scores a number of hits equal to the number of nodes in the system, including the control node, the surface has been completely razed in the invasion. Destroy all nodes on the planet, including the control node. The invasion is over. The system will need to be colonized anew in a future turn. Neither the attacker or defender has won the combat. Note: even if all the attacker's ships are destroyed, the results of an invasion is the same. All the attacker's ships could be destroyed and still have a successful invasion. Repelled invasions. If the defender control node survives and all the attacker's ships are destroyed, the invasion is over. The defender retains control of the system. After a round of combat, the attacker may choose to retreat, ending the invasion. When retreating, the attacker may make an impulse speed retreat movement. Surrender in invasions. In planetary invasions, the defender cannot retreat, but they may surrender. The defender may choose to surrender immediately, even before the first round of combat. If the defender surrenders, the attacker immediately gains control of the sector, and the invasion is over. Combat continues. If the invasion was not successful or repelled, another round of combat begins, without spending any additional commands, to continue the fight additional rounds of combat until either the attacker retreats, the defender surrenders, or the invasion is resolved. Capturing research nodes. When you take control of a rival's intact research node, the player whose research node was captured must choose one of their active projects to give it to you. Any research on the card is discarded. If you capture more than one research node, they must give you a project per node captured. If the research node is destroyed, nothing is captured. If the invaded player does not have any active projects, then no project is seized. Place captured projects in your project area. Capturing starbases. Starbases are too valuable to destroy. Once a starbase is placed on a system, it remains there for the rest of the game. When control of a system changes hands, the control of a starbase does too. When you take control of a starbase from a rival, take one of their command tokens. Place this token with one of your other command tokens face down. It may not be used this turn. When a starbase is captured, only the new owner's special rules, which affect starbases, apply. When a total annihilation result, the defender has lost control of the starbase and loses a command, but the attacker does not control it. The first player to take control of the uncontrolled starbase gains a command. Invading uncontrolled systems. Some systems may be developed but uncontrolled. You may invade uncontrolled planets normally. Uncontrolled planets do not have a control node to fight. Uncontrolled planets' resource node each add 1 dice as normal. The player to the right of the attacker rolls the uncontrolled system's attacks. Warp-capable civilizations' weapons hit rolls are modified by your shield's modifier normally. Civilization tech levels. Some civilization exploration cards will direct you to place a number of warp tokens on the system, along with the developing nodes on the system. The number of warp tokens corresponds to the level of the civilization. The higher the level of the civilization, the better their weapons and shields. When a player takes control of a system with a warp-capable civilization, discard the warp tokens. Note: rather than keeping the civilization card on the table, you can calculate the independence hit roll by subtracting the number of tokens. In example, a level 2 civilization is a 4 plus 2 hit, 6 minus 2, 4. The number of warp tokens are equal to the shield modifier, and it is their base hegemony resistance. Their hegemony resistance is also increased by the number of nodes in their system. Cultural hegemony. When your ships occupy a developed sector you don't control, you may attempt to culturally take over the system through hegemony. How resistant a system is to hegemony depends on how developed its infrastructure is and its cultural ascendancy. It normally requires spending at least 2 culture tokens to take control of a system via hegemony, one to make the attempt and another to take control, if the attempt was successful. The hegemony resistance of a system is equal to the number of structures in the system plus the ascendancy of the player who controls it. Starbases and nodes count as structures, and each add 1 to the system's hegemony resistance. The hegemony resistance of a system is equal to the number of structures in the system plus the ascendancy of the player who controls it. Starbases and nodes count as structures, and each add 1 to the system's hegemony resistance. To attempt a cultural hegemony, exhaust a command and spend a culture. Next, roll a die and add your current ascendancy. If your total is higher than the hegemony resistance of the system, you may pay an additional culture token to take control of the system. Place your control node on the system. Example: the Romulans at Ascendancy 2 occupy a Klingon system. The system's 3 nodes, 2 resource nodes, and the control node, and the Klingon's ascendancy of 1 gives the system hegemony resistance of 4. The Romulans use a command to spend a culture to attempt hegemony. They roll 3 and add their ascendancy, getting a total of 5, overcoming the system's resistance, so they spend another culture and take control. Tip: you can alternately think of ascendancy as reducing the system's resistance. Above, the Romulan's ascendancy of 2 reduces the Klingon's resistance from 5 to 3, so the Romulans need to roll higher than 3 to take control of the system. Hegemony of warp-capable civilizations. When you discover a level 1, 2, or 3 warp-capable civilization, the exploration card will direct you to develop some of the system's capacity and place a number of warp tokens on the system. The warp tokens on an independent warp-capable system is added to the system's hegemony resistance. Independent civilizations won't have control nodes. The hegemony resistance of the system is the number of developed resources nodes plus the number of warp tokens on the system. For example, the Romulans are going to attempt hegemony of a level 3 warp-capable civilization. The system has 3 developed nodes plus 3 warp tokens, giving the system a total hegemony resistance of 6. The Romulans will need to get a total of 7 on their hegemony attempt. With an ascendancy of 2, they still need to roll a 5 or better to succeed. You may not hegemony pre-warp inhabited systems. They must be colonized during the building phase. Note: even if your ascendancy is high enough relative to the system's resistance that hegemony is going to be automatically successful, you still need to pay a total of 2 culture, 1 for the attempt and 1 for the actual take control. Seizing starbases and research nodes. As in Planetary Invasion, when you take control of a system that contains a starbase, you gain control of command. Likewise, if you take control of a rival system with a research node, you take one of their projects. For details, see page 20. Commission fleets and starbases. Starbases allow you to build ships away from your home system. Grouping starships into a fleet allow you to move much more efficiently and may benefit from the fleet's special rules. Commission a starbase. Commissioning a starbase is a major endeavor, not to be taken lightly. To commission a starbase, exhaust a command and place a starbase token next to a system you control. There is no resource cost to commission a starbase, but you may only place 3 of them over the course of the entire game. You may only commission 1 starbase per ascendancy level you have achieved. You may control more than this if you have taken starbases from your rivals. Once placed, starbases are not moved, discarded, or destroyed. Each starbase you control increases your number of commands by 1. The additional command starts exhausted. You may not use them this turn. Forming a fleet. To group ships into a fleet, the ships must be in your home system or at one of your starbases. Only these systems have the facility necessary to equip and retrofit starships for specialized fleet configurations. Exhaust the command, take the ships off the board, and place them on one of the 3 fleet cards. Then place the appropriate fleet marker on the board in the same system. Fleet type and strength. Each civilization has 3 different fleet cards, each of which is double-sided. The different sides of fleet cards have different special rules and allow for different number of ships. When you commission a fleet, you must choose which side you're using. To use a different side of a fleet card, you must disband the fleet and recommission it at your home system or starbase. Number of fleets. The number of fleets you can form is limited by your ascendancy. You cannot have more fleets in play than your ascendancy tokens. You may form them in any order, i.e. you may commission your fleet number 3 when you only have 1 ascendancy token. Adding or removing ships from a fleet. You may add or remove ships from a fleet before or after movement command. You cannot add or remove ships from a fleet mid-movement. You do not have to be in your home system or at the starbase to add or remove ships from a fleet. Disbanding a fleet. At any time in your turn, including your building phase, you may choose to disband the fleet by taking the ships off the fleet card and putting them back on the board in the same sector. If a fleet ever contains fewer than 3 ships, it is immediately disbanded. It does not take a command to disband the fleet. Fleet in space battles. When rolling to hit with both a fleet and individual ships, roll the dice for the fleet separately if the fleet has a special rule that affects their attacks. Launch projects. On your turn, you may exhaust a command to draw 2 cards from your advancement deck and add them to your projects area. The number of research nodes you currently control is the maximum number of active projects you may have. You may launch projects even if doing so would put you over your maximum number of projects. Anytime you have more projects in your project area than you control research nodes, you must discard a number of projects until you are back down to your maximum number of projects allowed. You may discard projects that were already in your project area or newly drawn projects. Place any discarded cards on the bottom of your advancement deck and return any research tokens on the discarded projects to the supply. Do not shuffle your advancement deck. Note, you may sometimes take an advancement card from another player. If you discard an advancement card that came from another player's advancement deck, it goes back to the bottom of their deck. Utilize special rules. Some special rules on advancement or command consoles may require you to exhaust a command to use the rule. Special rules requiring the use of a command may be used multiple times per turn, unless they say otherwise. Special rules may only be used on your turn. Some cards' special rules will instruct you to exhaust the card itself. To exhaust a card, flip the card face down. Abilities that require you to exhaust a card can only be used once per game round. Exhausted cards are refreshed at the end of each game round during the recharge stage. Recharge stage. At the end of each game round, there's a recharge stage in which players' resource nodes generate resources and some basic game maintenance takes place. Victory check. At the beginning of each recharge stage, if anyone achieved Ascendancy or Supremacy Victory, they have won the game. For details on winning the game, see page 4. Extermination. If a player has no starships and controls no systems, their civilization has been exterminated and that player is eliminated from the game. Resource generation. Each player takes a resource for each resource node they control. Each node produces one resource of its type. Production nodes generate production, research node generates research, and culture nodes generate culture. Some advancements may also generate resources. Trade profits. Each trade agreement has a number of resources pictured on it. During the resource generation, players take the resources pictured in the trade agreements they have received. Tip: letting the player who's in the lead continue to hold the trade agreements may allow them to widen their lead. For example, the Klingon player currently holds a Federation 1 production agreement and a Romulan 2 production agreement. They still hold their 3 production agreement. During the resource generation, the Klingon player doesn't get anything from their own trade agreement. You can't trade with yourself and gets a total of 3 production from the rival trade agreements. Remember, your trade agreements don't do you any good. Only trade agreements from other players generate resources. Exhausted trade agreements. Sometimes the trade agreements may be exhausted. You do not receive any resources from exhausted trade agreements during resource generation. Exhausted trade agreements may not be revoked or exchanged until they are refreshed during the maintenance. Note: the Romulans' suspicious special rule requires them to exhaust all trade agreements when they receive them. This forces them to wait a turn until they benefit from the agreement. Resources from advancements. Some advancements generate resources. These cards will not picture the resource being generated, since they are often vary from turn to turn. For example, the card to the left, the Federation player gets a research token for each starbase they control. When they commission or take control of a new starbase, they receive more research during the resource generation. Maintenance. After all the players have finished generating resources, there are a few things to do before starting the next game round. Refresh cards and command tokens. As part of maintenance, refresh all cards and command tokens so they are ready to be used again the following turn. Each player should have 5 command plus 1 starbase plus any additional commands from advancements. Refresh trade agreements. Normally, trade agreements are face up when you receive them and stay that way. However, they may sometimes be exhausted. During maintenance, refresh any exhausted trade agreements. Add warp tokens to ships at warp. During maintenance, add warp tokens to ships at warp. During maintenance, add any additional warp tokens to any ship currently traveling at warp. Add research tokens to phenomena. During maintenance, add a research token to any phenomena that doesn't already have one. If a phenomena already has a research token on it, don't add an additional token. The first player to brave the hazard each game round claims the research from the phenomena. Optional rules. The following includes a variety of optional rules you may use to make the game more challenging, fast, or just different. You may use any, all, or none of these in your games. Feel free to make up your own variations and house rules too. Accelerated rules. The following optional rules make the game play a little faster. This can be useful if you're short of time. Simultaneous first turns. All players take their first turn simultaneously, building and spending their commands at the same time. Players may not make contact during this turn. If everyone agrees, you may also take your second turn simultaneously. Extra starting resources. Each player starts with 8 production, 6 research, and 4 culture. Starting project. During the game setup, each player starts with 1 project on their project area. If you're a new player, draw the project randomly. If you're more experienced, you can pick the project you start with. Starting advancements. During the game setup, each player starts with 1 completed advancement. Players can either draw the advancement randomly or look through their advancement deck and choose which advancement they'd like. Random turn order. Instead of devoting resources to choose turn order cards in the initiative stage of each game round, pass the turn order cards out randomly each turn. Wild culture. Culture tokens may also be used as either production or research tokens. Easier ascension. Ascendancy tokens only cost 4 culture tokens instead of 5. Advanced rules. When all players are experienced captains with a few games under their belt, try some of these optional rules for extra challenge. Mystery turn order. Use twice as many turn order cards as there are players. Each game round, shuffle the turn order cards and set half of them aside. When it's each player's turn to choose a turn order card, they don't reveal their choice to their rivals until it's their turn. Random galaxy. Instead of separating the phenomenons in the setup, shuffle the system disks together. Unrestricted trade routes. Rather than asking for permission to travel through the sectors of rivals with whom you are at peace, you may freely move through rival ships with which you are at peace. Trade agreements may only be revoked during your turn. Humble beginnings. Each player starts with no resources and no ascendancy. Focus research. When you choose a command to launch a new project, you may look through your advancement deck and choose a project to launch instead of drawing two randomly. Sample first turn. On your first turn, you start with your 3 ships in your home system, ready to explore the galaxy. Here's what your first foray into the galaxy might look like. In this example, Sally is playing as the Federation. The special rule Random Galaxy is being used, which shuffles the phenomenons into the stack of system disk in the setup. Building phase. On Sally's first turn, she has 3 production, 3 research, and 3 culture. Since she hasn't discovered any new systems yet and Earth is fully developed, there are not as many decisions to make as there will be in future turns. Sally decides to spend 1 production to build an additional ship. This still leaves 2 production in the reserves, enough to build some resource nodes on her next turn. If she finds an undeveloped system, she could colonize. Command phase. In her command phase, Sally has 5 commands. For her first command, Sally exhausts a command to launch new projects. One key early decision is whether or not to commission a starbase on Earth. On one hand, it would increase her commands by 1, which is very useful. On the other hand, Sally can already build ships on her home system, so some of the utility of a starbase is lost when it's in the home system. For now, Sally waits to see what systems she discovers. Second command. With her second command, she has a ship enter warp. She moves one of her ships off Earth and places a single warp token on the table pointing back to Earth. Third command. With the third command, she has the same ship exit warp. With a single warp token, her ship can exit warp up to 1 system away. Because there are no existing space lanes connected to Earth, she has to place a new space lane. Sally rolls a new space lane die and gets a 3. Her ship travels to the end of the space lane, then she places a new system disk at the end of the new space lane. The new system is Murasaki 312, a phenomenon. Her ship now has to brave the hazard. John, the player to her right, rolls a single die for her ship. He rolls a 4, below the phenomenon's level 5 hazard, so her ship is safe. Because Sally's ship survived the hazard, she takes the research token and places it on Starfleet Diplomatic Corps, committing it to her newly launched project. The Federation's Explore New Strange World rule means she gets to add a bonus culture to her reserves because she discovered a new phenomenon. Fourth and fifth commands. With Sally's fourth and fifth commands, she has a second ship enter warp and then has it exit warp into another new system. She again rolls the space lane die and places a new space lane and then places a new system at the end of a new space lane. She finds a planetary system that is not hazardous, so Sally draws an exploration card. Delta 4 has 2 research sites and 1 open site. The card directs Sally to develop 2 nodes in priority order. The production comes first, so Sally places a production node on the open site. Research is next in the priority build order, so she places a research node on the second node. If she's able to take control of the system later, Sally may want to spend the resources to build a culture node on the open site instead. The Federation special rule means that Sally gets another bonus culture for discovering a civilization. She has now 5 culture, enough culture that she could ascend, but decides to wait and use the culture to attempt hegemony of Delta 4 on her next turn. To successfully hegemony a system, she'll need at least 2 culture. She has used her last command, so her turn is over. Strategy for next turn. Finding a phenomenon and inhabited system means that Sally isn't going to be able to build a colony in her next turn. Developed systems have to be taken by invasion or hegemony. But the Federation's prime directive prohibits them from invading systems. So Sally will have to attempt hegemony the Delta 4 system on her next turn if she wants to gain control of it. With 2 already built nodes, she definitely does. As shown above, the 2 developed nodes and 2 warp token and the hegemony resistance of the system is 4. Sally has 1 ascendancy and the Federation starting advancement gives her +1 hegemony attempts. When she attempts hegemony, she needs to surpass the system's resistance, which is +2 to the roll. She'll need to roll 3 or better to take control of the system. On her next turn, she's planning on adding another research to her project during the building phase, then trying to brave the hazard in the Murasaki 312 phenomenon. If that's successful, the research token of the phenomenon will be enough to finish her first project. If all goes well, she will have the second system under her control and a second completed advancement by the end of her next turn. Game Round Summary Initiative. Starting with the player holding the first turn order card, players spend resource to influence galactic politics and seize the initiative for this game round. Initiative. Starting with the player holding the first turn order card, players spend resources to influence galactic politics and seize the initiative this game round. The player who spends the most resources gets their pick of the turn order cards for the coming round. Players may only spend resources if they made first contact. Execution. Each player takes a turn starting with their building phase and followed by their command phase. Building costs and command options are found on each reference card. Recharge. At the end of each game round, players check for victory, generate resources, and do the maintenance to prepare the next game round. Check for victory. Has any player achieved an Ascendancy or Supremacy Victory? Has any player achieved an Ascendancy or Supremacy Victory while still controlling their homeworld? Generate resources. Players take resources from the trade agreements and nodes they control. Maintenance. Add warp tokens to ships at warp, research tokens to phenomenons, refresh exhausted commands and cards. Credits. Game design, Sean Swigart, Aaron Dale. Graphic design, Katie Dillon. Approvals coordinator, Peter Prexkop. Design director, John Kovaletsky. Producers, Peter Simonovich, John Paul Brisigotti. 3D design, Charles Woods. Acknowledgements, John Van Sitters, Marian Cordry, and Yasmin Elaki, Veronica Hart, Brian Lady, Keith Lowenadler. Special thanks to all the Battlefront staff who provided feedback and playtesting. Playtesters, James Abel, Jason Boyaki, Jason Delaney, Justin Evans, Patrick Gribble, Mark Honeycutt, Sally Honeycutt, Leonard Landry, Stuart Lapwood, Jeff Lindsay, Greg Lockton, Greg Morris, Richard Rowe, Phil Petrie, Gabriel Rosauro, Rob Sadler, Steve Shippe, Connor Sippe, Benjamin Terrell, Dean Webb, Lizzie Willick, Les Whitaker, William Yowell. And that is Star Trek Ascendancy Rulebook Read-Through. Produced by Variable Play, August 24, 2021. Thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, bye.